There's just a quick video about this stage of the life stage development called emerging adulthood. This is seen as a new era, and it's just going to look at some new questions facing ministry today. It takes a village to raise a child. It's an African proverb. That's probably the foundation of youth development, and something that we still see today, especially with the trend saying that it takes about six adults involved in a child's life for them to be able to make it through the adolescent journey. Historically, there used to be a village set up where there were children and there were adults, and these children would be parented by their own parents, and then the rest of the parents in the village, there'll be child A who will be parented by parents A, parent B, parent C, etc. And child B will be parented by child A, etc. For these children to progress to adulthood, there was generally a rite of passage or traditions in these communal villages that would help transition and see a stage of change for a young person to move from being a child to being an adult. They'll generally get betrothed to someone, go and build a room into the family house or a hut, or build their own hut as part of the village. Then they'll get married and be seen as an adult, and then start contributing back to society. As culture went on, however, there was the Industrial Revolution, and there started to be this stage of overlap where there was a child and there was an adult, and there's kind of this in-between stage, and this was coined the phrase adolescence. They'll begin to notice this period of transition where a young person will be in between being a child and an adult. Marriage was seen as a big part of being an adult, but there were less rites of passages existing as adults were leaving the farm and the villages to work in factories, and sometimes even both parents were working in different factories, and the uncles and aunties who would all be together with the child in the village, working on the farm, teaching the trade, would be all out and scattered, and these kids would be as part of the village and then be left alone, and then have their parents come at night, and they would have to start fending for themselves a bit. As time went on, however, this life stage of adolescence kept growing and began to be seen as its own stage, a unique stage with unique questions. This began to prolong from a year to a few years, then to many years. Today, this stage is starting to be spoken about as starting biologically and ending sociologically. Said to start with puberty and ends when society sees this young person as being an adult and calling them an adult and part of their society. Today, puberty starts at around 11 and 12 for girls, and biologically, adolescent journey is always measured by puberty, which is taken by the age that girls start puberty. As you can see here, this then progressed to a three-stage view. As adolescence prolonged, they started to note different questions for different stages, and started to be coined this idea of early, mid, and late adolescence. As rites of passage deteriorated and the village models disappeared almost altogether as the cities started to boom, the length of adolescence increased almost as a mirror image to how adults were starting to be removed from these young people's worlds. Chap Clark, in his study The Hurt Project, he wrote a book called Hurt 2.0, where he spent time journeying alongside adolescents and to see what their world was like, and he called it Hurt after he did all the study. He identified that this idea of systemic abandonment, where the system has abandoned young people, and a lack of social capital, the lack of social interaction being the leading cause of this, adults being removed, adults being the capital in these young people's world, being removed and replaced by professional relationships, not real relationships. This has been seen to draw out this stage as Year 9s are left with Year 9s to work out what it means to be an adult. Ultimately, Chap Clark concludes that the system, the village model, it takes a village to raise a child, has failed young people. We have failed young people. With this prolonged period, we notice the three stages developing. And this started being called early, which was 11-year-olds to 13-year-olds, mid 14-year-olds to 17-year-olds, and late 18-year-olds to 21-year-olds. The reason it became 3 stages because they noticed different questions and different developmental frameworks coming out for young people across these stages. Things like physical development, intellectual development, emotional development, social development, spiritual development, all had different questions and different physical and psychosocial developmental frameworks and questions developing for each of these. Then young adults came about. Young adulthood is seen as doing the adult thing in a young way. Once a young person finished the adolescent journey and took their place in the adult world, being seen as by the society as a full member of adulthood, they were not yet seen as reaching a full level of maturity. They had reached the marks of what it meant to be an adult by this society, things like completing education, consolidating your vocation and what you want to do, being residential and financial independent from your parents, you could look after yourself, getting married and settling down and having a family. These today are still seen the common markers of what it means to be an adult. However, when we look at society today, these markers aren't being achieved till later on. It's been said that 30 is the new 20, which appears to be true, where people would be settled down at about age 20, 50 years ago. Now it's taken to about age 30. So there's this whole new stage between 20 and 30, which has been identified as this new stage called emerging adulthood. So as someone finishes adolescence and they're not yet ready to take on the stage of doing adulthood in a young way, generally the age between 18 and 29 is this new stage with new questions called emerging adulthood. Jensen Arnott was the scientist that identified this area. He started asking young people if they felt like they were an adult and what that kind of looked like, and he ended up coming up with 5 theories around this. He noted at the conclusion of this and developing emerging adulthood theory that the lack of social capital and the complexities now of being a young person in our society has created this unique stage called emerging adulthood. Young people have finished their adolescent journey but are not yet ready to move into the responsibilities of being an adult. They, in turn, want this stage of continuing to identify who they are and what it means to be a person in this society and work out what being an adult will look like to them. It would be wrong, however, to consider this a continuation of adolescence due to huge social changes between being a young person inside a schooling system that is relatively stable, it's got a lot of control, to having freedom, being free, finishing school, free to drive, the right to vote, they can legally drink and partake in the adult aspects of society. They're legally considered an adult. So it would be wrong to place them in the same category as a teenager and as an adolescent. However, in light of that, they're not yet ready to be a full contributing member of the adult world or consider calling themselves an adult. Jensen Arnott looked at 5 characteristics unique, but not unique to the emerging adult journey, but typical of it. So these are seen in other stages of life as well, but these are most heightened at this stage. He called this an age of identity exploration, where a young person will be seeking to consolidate who they are as a person, what they value, how they want to present themselves, who's important to them. And typically with Erik Erikson's theory, this will be done in adolescence. However, now, due to the adolescent journey, this question is really being tackled between 18 and 29 years old, generally around 25, starting to consolidate what this looks like. He also identified this as an age of instability, where the lack of structures around a young person's world can leave them with a whole bunch of possibilities, but also instability where they need to really forge this out for themselves. They could have a job and then change that job, start a uni course, change that uni course, travel, where there could be structures. This is really unstable, it's not fixed, it's prone to change. It's also known as an age of self-focus, not selfishness, but a real sense of a stage to invest in oneself to determine who that person is, who you're going to be. Focus on developing yourself to get yourself primed and ready to partake in the adult world. This means that they can't be necessarily as outward looking to others as they're seeking to invest in who they are as a person, to consolidate that and bring that together. In light of this, however, there's a common theme of calling this an age of feeling in between, and not quite yet being an adult, but still being a child. Not really saying I am an adolescent, I'm not like those teenagers, but I'm not yet an adult. I'm in between these two worlds and trying to work out what this looks like today. In light of all this tension and flux that's going on in their life, they tend to be very positive around this and saying that there's so many possibilities that lay before them, even though their life may not be together, they may not have much financial security, structure, or anything particularly going well for them at this stage. They're still optimistic about the future and the possibilities that lay ahead. So this looks like the emerging adult journey. It's this new life stage. It comes with a whole bunch of new questions and challenges, and it needs some new answers in tackling these and journeying with young people as they discover what this looks like, which poses some great new possibilities as these young people really start to shape our world and shape themselves as a considered person and knowing what they value and who they are before stepping out. The real question is, what village is raising our child today? When we look at these young people coming to this point because there are no adults involved in their world, and it can be a real scary and challenging time. So when we consider ministry possibilities, this is a real good place that we can play in and really start to speak truth to the heart of these questions, really speak truth to these young people by walking alongside them through the adolescent journey and through this emerging adult journey, so they can step up and step into society as an adult who's ready to do the adult thing in a mature way, not just a young way. And this is the reality of the life course towards adulthood today. We see a child, this complex adolescent journey, this emerging adult journey, this young adult journey to being an adult. And it's come a long way from the village model.